Now, we have four fantastic speakers for you here to dazzle you with their insights and field your questions. But before we hear from any of them, I'd first like to run through a couple of quick points of housekeeping before introducing our speakers to you. Now, firstly, for today, we are encouraging your interaction, but for once, we don't require you to have your video camera on. Feel free to switch that off because when we are looking for you to participate, we're going to be asking you to do so using the chat box. I'm sure pretty much everyone in the world at the moment is familiar with Zoom, but if you're not, do take a moment to familiarize yourself. You can usually find the chat box by just hovering your mouse towards the bottom of your Zoom window. That will bring up options, including one that looks like a speech bubble, and feel free to type your questions in there. When you are typing a question in, it's always handy if you can nominate who that question will be directed to. While you're doing that, you might also care just to reset your screen so you've got your favored viewing option. You can find the viewing options at the top in the right-hand corner. Just hover your mouse up there. I normally go with gallery view, but feel free to select whatever is going to work best for you. I should also let you know that for each one of you out there that is joining us today, we're going to be donating $50 for every one of you to Oz Harvest or Kiwi Harvest in order to help folk impacted by recent events. Now, like I said, we have four fantastic speakers for you today. So let me tell you a little bit about each one of them now. First up, we have from the city of Mississauga in Canada, the Chief Information Officer, Sean Slack. Sean, great to see you there. As the first CIO for the sixth largest city in Canada, Sean has played a critical role in reimagining how city services are delivered and has successfully implemented the city's first IT master plan. He's being joined by a gentleman who's a little bit closer to home, coming to us from the city of Darwin, the General Manager for Innovation, Growth and Development Services, Joshua Sattler. Joshua successfully led the largest smart city project in Australia, which was lauded for its advancement in smart technology implementation. In 2020, the City of Darwin was also recognised by Smart Cities Australia and New Zealand for its privacy management and ethical use of AI framework. They're being joined by our speaker from Intel, who leads up the Internet of Things practice in that organisation for Australia, Ocean Ryan. Ocean is passionate about IoT and its infinite possibilities and enjoys exploring how IoT interacts with other disruptive technologies, including AI, and she spends her time working with business leaders to optimize outcomes using technology. Our fourth speaker today is the co-founder and CEO of iOmniscient, Dr. Rustam Kanga, a gentleman who founded a video analytics platform named one of the world's best by Gartner. He also led the development of the world's first commercial AI-based system, and his book, IQ Smart Cities, Safety, Security and Efficiency, provided a roadmap for the Singapore Safe City project. Closer to home, he's also been responsible for developing the safety system of Sydney Metro. So like I said, four fantastic speakers for you, all ready and waiting to field your questions. But I might start by fielding a few questions of my own. So Sean, it's fantastic to see you joining us all the way from Canada. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to be part of this webinar this morning for us. Can you please tell us a little bit, though, about your Smart City Master Plan? I understand it stretches over 10 years. Keen to understand, though, how it's coming to life in 2021 and beyond.
Great, thanks, Brad. And yeah, so the city of Mississauga, if you don't know, is amongst the Great Lakes in Canada, and sixth largest city right beside Toronto. So thank you for having me on today. Real pleasure with our other esteemed speakers. So the Smart City Master Plan was endorsed by our council in the spring of 2019, and really is the framework for us to make good decisions about city building, recognizing that digital in the public realm is a significant change to how cities evolve because of data privacy, and how we use technology to be efficient in delivering services, but also be innovative and to really drive things like the economy, but also things like advancing issues like gridlock, traffic, environment. So really listening to the public and providing solutions that enable those services through technology, but in a responsible way. And I think that's the key thing about the master plan, is applying that lens of being responsible as government.
Got it. Thank you. Joshua, I'll bring you into the conversation now. As the General Manager for Innovation, Growth and Development Services at the City of Darwin, and having implemented Australia's largest smart city project, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced through that project? And I guess importantly for the audience out there, Is there anything that you've done that you would have done differently if you had it a second time around?
Thanks, Brad. And firstly, I'd also like to, I guess, acknowledge the traditional owners of where I'm sitting today in Darwin, the Larrakia, the saltwater people, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and a firm commitment to work with the young up-and-coming elders of this generation. So, yes, in Darwin, the largest smart city in Australia in 2019, largest project in Australia. I guess the pitfalls and traps associated with that weren't necessarily the technology. The biggest things for us were the privacy and ethics associated with the deployment and use of the technology. So for us, it started the journey once we finished the project, I guess, to re-engineer in reverse a lot of the privacy framework associated with the technology we deployed. And that's been some of the best learnings coming out of what we've done so far in the first 2 years. And obviously, as a local government, we're more than happy to share that with all the other local governments across Australia and have done so over the last couple of years as well. So definitely privacy frameworks associated with the deployment of the technology. As the technology providers aren't governed by a legislative act, as we are in local government, we have different parameters we need to fulfil in actually implementing that. So they were some of the biggest traps, privacy and the ethical use of some of the technology we deployed. And exciting times for Darwin. We've got the T-shirt. We've been awarded for so many things. We're using it in so many different ways, and I think we've taken the community along and built trust within the community in doing so. So my suggestion with anyone thinking of putting their toe in the water with smart cities is also always first upfront check the privacy and ethics associated with the deployment and what's your best use case as a local government in delivering that. So more than happy to share at any point. I don't like seeing local government start from point A, and they're the lessons we learn also engaging with our neighbours 2 hours or 2.5 hours to the north of us in Singapore and accelerating our journey in smart cities. So all the local governments out there, please do reach out, ask questions, and definitely don't start from point A because we've all done it before.
And definitely encouraging questions from the audience to come through there. So we'll see what they have to ask you. I'm glad you got the T-shirt though. That's usually all you need up in Darwin, isn't it?
Yeah, a singlet or a very light shirt. Otherwise, you look like you've just come out of the water.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much for that. And definitely keen to get a little bit further into some of the privacy aspects of what you've done and how you navigated your way through that. And we'll talk about that as we move into the conversation. But Dr. Rostam Kanga, thank you so much for joining us, a gentleman that I've known for quite a while now, based on the fantastic work you've been doing with iOmniscient. Keen to get your perspective. Oh, my apologies. Sorry, Ocean. I was going to go to you next. I'm skipping through my questions a little bit too quickly. So apologies for that. Now, yourself and Intel have been involved in local government and council implementations across the globe. I'm keen to get your perspective on how AI and edge technologies have been crucial to the success of connected communities.
No offense taken, Brad, but thank
you.
Look, I guess before answering and addressing the question, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. This event is being hosted by Intel, and we're really delighted to have everyone in a robust conversation. So, yeah, again, encouraging everyone to pop in questions here. I guess from an Intel perspective, Brad, we really see the technology changing, disrupting the way we live, the way we work, but especially the way we connect as people. And, within the cities, it is within the communities. We have, technologies that we all hear about being, the AI, the IoT, the new connectivities with 5G and cloud capabilities as well. They are 4 big buzzwords, but at the end of the day, they are really driving the efficiency, innovation and exciting new opportunities. And we will need it, because when we look and we step back and we look at the global share of the population living in urban areas, in 2018 it was 55%, and we are about to witness the most rapid growth ever in history. So you look at the forecasted growth now, they're talking about up to 70% by 2050. So this will, this rapid growth will drive issues, especially around public safety. So what Joshua mentioned, and hopefully we'll talk about a bit later, and also transportation. Transportation is a big one. That's where you see congestion management, along with sustainability issues popping up into urban areas and cities. So within Intel, as we work with cities across the globe, we tend to see a convergence of AI solution, computer vision, and edge computing coming together to really address some of those challenges. And that's one of the reasons why we invited the partner iOmniscient today and Dr. Rustam to give you practical tools on, what you can implement today within your precinct to solve some of these challenges. So yeah, I guess hopefully leading into Dr. Rustam here.
You've done a better job of leading into him than I could have done. So thank you for that. So Dr. Rustam, thank you also for joining us. We've framed up, I guess, the topic here as being related to AI. So I guess this is a good opportunity for you to tell us a little bit about the key reasons why you see customers being interested in technology such as AI, and specifically the kind of computer vision solutions that you implement.
Well, I think our customers are interested in all these new technologies because it solves their problems more effectively than with traditional human systems, and also more cost effectively. As an example of a more effective solution, if we can reduce response times for a traffic accident by, say, 80%, which is what we've done in many of our cities, that is a key benefit in terms of reducing congestion, in terms of getting the ambulances in fast, et cetera, right? In terms of solving the problems more cost effectively, as I'm sure we'll see through this conversation, it's actually cheaper to make a system smart than to leave it as a dumb system. Now, local governments have many problems to solve. They have swimming pools to manage, libraries, rubbish dumping. They worry about parking. They run major events. They have graffiti problems and so on. And of course, they have to manage their local roads. And essentially what we offer is a system that will address all these things in an integrated way with a single system. You mentioned computer vision. In fact, we offer artificial intelligence-based multi-sensory analytic systems. What does that mean? Humans use their eyes, their ears, their nose, and so on. They use all their senses. And so what we offer is a system that'll do video analysis, it'll also do sound analysis, smell analysis, all at the same time to give the system a better understanding of their environment. So for example, if somebody falls down, you say, oh, he's fallen down, go and help him. But if you hear a gunshot at the same time, you would say, don't go there, somebody's got a gun. So this ability to understand the total environment using senses similar to what a human would use is, in fact, what we offer to our customers.
Brilliant. All right, so I want to come back to Sean now to talk a little bit more about the strategy that you've been putting in place in the city of Mississauga. Can you tell us how the city's been uplifting connectivity to improve city services?
Yeah, so it's an interesting conversation that I've been hearing from the other speakers, and the one thing that I think making sure that you can provide the connectivity is the framework, because a lot of the smart technology is right on top of the connectivity, whether it's 5G or Wi-Fi or fiber. We've been building a fiber network for about 20 years. So we actually operate with the largest publicly owned and operated fiber network in Canada. And so on top, so that is our IoT network. And so we've taken that, extended across the entire city so that we have fiber to our traffic intersections. And then from there, we would take Wi-Fi, and we've put that throughout what we call our districts. So those are our, the urban areas where you have the storefronts and the, where walkability is, and build district Wi-Fi through those areas. And what that's allowed us to do then is to connect sensors to make your intersection smart with an advanced traffic management solution. And one real quick example would be, when a train comes into a terminal and there's a parking lot, those people get off the train, they get into the cars, and that creates congestion, but for a very short period of time in a very localized area. And so this is where you can start to use the technology and have integration between your transit systems and your traffic management systems to anticipate and plan for that short bit of gridlock, and actually put different timings into your traffic intersections to quickly move that traffic out of the community. I mean, so those are ways simple ways of having sensors, but integration with other systems to solve a problem, which has frustrated people getting off the train and then sitting for signalized intersections that think it's the middle of the day and it's not busy. So I think that's one really good example.
And I think this is one of the things that's true about smart city implementations is that they are generally designed to solve real problems, but the problems themselves are quite challenging. Otherwise, they would have been solved some time back. So definitely looking forward to hearing some more examples from all of you with regard to the kind of work that you've been doing and the benefits that are coming through. But Joshua, I'll come back to you for a little bit. We've talked about connectivity here, and I guess connectivity is important for moving data around. But as the battle against COVID continues, how have you been using data and smart technologies to boost your economy and to create, I guess, what might be called the new normal for the businesses and citizens of Darwin?
Yeah, look, Brad, we've been pretty lucky up here in Darwin. Obviously, we've only had a few lockdowns. So for us, the first lockdown was quite critical, and our response as a local government was critical. One thing COVID's taught us is, we can't rest on our laurels and wait for someone else to provide the stimulus. So what we did here in Darwin is pretty much look at what traffic movement was coming through on our analytics from our CCTV network, where people were going. We looked at the integration of our parking sensors, how many people were parking in the city at any one given time. And these are all rapid data sets. So we're ingesting all this rapid information, not waiting for longitudinal assessments for what people are putting through their tills that ABS bring out every year or so. We need to act pretty quickly. So what we did, we developed a web responsive browser. It was called My Darwin, quicker than FBOS. It was something we got off the ground within 5 weeks. And originally we put, as a council, we put some parking reserves funding into that to encourage some stimulus directly into the tills of small business. So what we envisaged as an isolation hibernation, we saw happen very quickly in a short period of time. So once everyone was about to come back out, there was almost this hibernating state, which people were just quite happy to sit at home, still get takeaways, still socialise at home, not necessarily come back out and support the local businesses, and which we see across the country. So this platform actually allowed us to do that. We would not have been able to develop it unless we were actually looking at and ingesting some of this information, which we're receiving live time through our Smart City project deployed mid-2019. So perfect timing for us to respond. And since then, it's been adopted nationally, internationally, as a web responsive browser system and working quite successfully. And it's something we'll use as a legacy platform. As you know, we're quite prone to natural disasters up here in the northern parts of Australia. We had a cyclone go through in 2017 and we're just about primed for another one, I think, in 2021, 2022. So we'll see where that one goes. But for us, it was one of those instances where we assessed the data, we gained insights from the information. It was live time, it was rapid, and we're able to make a data-driven informed decision for our elected members to then make a decision to back us as a council to provide economic stimulus and not have to wait for anything else. And the multiplier associated with our stimulus was 6 times. At the end of the day, we put approximately $1 million into the stimulus activity. And combined across the Northern Territory, ACT and other cities, we provided $12 million worth of economic stimulus for small business, which was pretty cool, and on the back of some basic data we were able to ingest.
Fantastic. And once again, I guess it comes back to the notion of the practical outcomes here in terms of, in this instance, building resilience, not just in the face of natural disasters, but in terms of building business confidence. But we might come back to that a little bit later because I want to swing back around to Dr. Rustam again. You described before about the work that your computer, or the outcomes that your computer vision technology can deliver. Can we get into that in a little bit more detail then in terms of the challenges that local government faces, specifically with topics like road and traffic management and waste management? What are some of the examples of work that you've done that's really helped there?
Okay, let's talk about each of those. Let's talk about roads first. First of all, when you're trying to understand what is happening on a road, you have to be able to understand, the system has to be able to understand exactly what's happening. The cars are going the wrong way, they're speeding, there might be red light violations, trucks which are taller than they need to be when they're approaching a short bridge, things falling off a truck, and so on. But the intent is not to have a system that just understands these things at one point, at the camera and so on. What we actually implement is a system which has intelligence across the whole system rather than at each node. Let me give you an example. In Singapore, which was the first smart city that we implemented, that was back in 2013, they had a riot a bus ran over a laborer in a place called Little India, and the friends of that person got upset. They set fire to the bus. It became a riot, and in Singapore, they don't like riots too much. So what happened was that the system understood what had happened, and from the camera itself, it found the nearest policeman. It found the nearest ambulance. It found the nearest fire brigade and told them where to go and so on. And so within 2 minutes, the police were on the scene. Within 8 minutes, the ambulance was there. In 1 hour, they'd all gone home. Next day, 24 people were charged and so on. So the reason is that it's not a system where you have people sitting in front of large control rooms with hundreds of monitors trying to figure out what's happening and so on. The system itself understands what's happening. It'll find the nearest responder, nearest appropriate responder, and tell them where to go and what to do. So it's an automated response system. And that's an example of the type of thing that we would implement for roads. Let me talk about rubbish dumping as well, since you asked about that. In Singapore too, they have a paranoia for cleanliness. They want to make sure that there's no rubbish anywhere. So if a dustbin overflows, they want to make sure that it's cleaned up at once. So they have these SWAT vans, these trucks that go around cleaning up the bins. But how do they know which bin is overflowing and needs cleaning? So they have cameras over there, and our system understands what's happening at the bin. It understands if it has overflowed, and then it'll find the nearest SWAT van near that bin, and it'll tell them, it'll send them an image of the bin, it'll show them what's happening, and the van can come and clean it up. Again, that's an automated response system. So you're not just talking about understanding what's happening, you're talking about solving the whole problem.
I guess what we're hearing here is that there are so many different problems that we can be applying technology to. So, Ocean, I wouldn't mind just getting your perspective. You've heard a lot of different examples here of the activity that's happening in different cities around the world using technology. How does this line up against the kind of work that you're seeing happening with the other clients that Intel is working with today?
Yeah, I was actually just about to build up on what Dr. Rastam said. So one of the things that we tend to see as a requirement from, councils that we are working with is that you have to be obviously quite cost conscious. And so there's a real demand for leveraging, if you're talking about a camera, for instance, making sure that you can actually leverage the data coming from that camera for several use cases. You cannot afford to just put one single camera for monitoring that intersection, and that's all it's going to be doing, right? And the other thing as well is, Dr. Reston just mentioned a project that was done back in 2013. Well, the people that we are talking to really need to future-proof the investment. And here we're talking especially long-term. So we're talking 10 to 20 years into the future. And that's one of the things that we address as well when we talk about implementing some of the solutions to solve those challenges is really, the long-term approach and maximizing profit as well through use cases.
Well, I think when you're spending public money, then the ability to get bang for your buck over and over and over again has got to be a priority. Now, just a reminder to everyone out there in the audience that I'm very happy to open it up to your questions. So if there is something that you'd like to put to one of our experts, please feel free to type your question into the chat window. I'm keeping a watch on that as we're moving through. So I'll keep a lookout for anything that you've got that you want to ask them. Please, in the first instance, though, it's always helpful if you can nominate who that question might be directed to. Now, Sean, I'll come back to yourself. We've talked a lot about the different kinds of projects that are being implemented here, but when you're running a city, you've got to be providing benefit to everybody. So I'm keen to understand how at the City of Mississauga you've been tackling the issue of digital inequality to ensure that citizens aren't being left out of the projects you're putting in place.
Yeah, so so COVID really did emphasize that. So the Smart City Master Plan, the key term is a smart city for everyone. So it is about inclusivity. And we know there is inequality in the access to broadband. So we have some initiatives where we're increasing access to laptops through laptop lending programs, donation programs with private partnerships, and expanding the Wi-Fi lending program through our libraries. But one of the interesting things that we're seeing with city building, and Oshin had mentioned this a little bit, is the future proofing. And so we have two large developments happening in Mississauga, the Brightwater development and Lakeview development. So Brightwater is about 75 acres, but Lakeview is about 250-acre waterfront development. And so for the first time, we are doing a redevelopment of lands on the waterfront, with a smart city lens applied to it, which from a data privacy perspective, this is just down the road where Sidewalk Labs was happening in Toronto. So the smart city framework that we have is really intended to make sure that when we look at the digital aspect of this community, that data and privacy is central to that. But some of the big investments in Lakeview would be vacuum waste, as an example. And so vacuum waste is a complete rethinking of how rubbish will be picked up. It's not picked up at the curb. There is a infrastructure that's built into the community, and centrally vacuum waste to a location where it's taken away. And so these are long-term investments, public-private partnerships, and it really is changing how you think about city building. So there's a couple of good examples there too.
Brilliant. You also touched on privacy there, and I guess this is a good opportunity to bring Joshua back into the conversation, given that City of Darwin recently won an award for its privacy framework. So Joshua, what advice would you have for other local governments then when it comes to building a robust privacy framework, particularly as they're looking to expand their AI and analytics projects?
Oh, look, Brad, from our perspective, we had to start at pretty much ground zero to reassess the technology against the legislation first and foremost. And don't try and do that by yourself as a local government. Bring in some experts to shoulder through that process. We brought on a great colleague from Queensland, Senator Cole Stevens from Ground Up Consulting, helped us through that process and engaged directly with the Office of the Information Commissioner. Critical that you actually do that from the start. And otherwise, if you don't do that, I guess the legislative traps associated with not doing it come down pretty hard. I just want to maybe backtrack as well. Dr. Russell mentioned, the analytics and the associated outcomes with regard to receiving information on a fixed frame automatically. And I think the discussions we had with Northern Territory Police and Fire here in the Territory was critical for that. When putting someone in front of a screen and watching multiple cameras, from a police perspective, they're only looking at about a 2% conversion rate, let alone the mental implications of someone actually sitting there for 8-hour shifts, rotating that around within your organisation. So for us, it was critical that we had that artificial intelligence on the back of any fixed frame we were measuring from, which served us really well moving forward. I just wanted to reiterate that because that's a really, really important message, and it's a great opportunity for not only local governments, but larger associations and authorities to do things completely different with applying those types of technologies, and which we've done successfully here as well. But coming back to privacy and the frameworks associated with it, we all went through the workplace health and safety issues through the 80s and 90s. We went through environmental and sustainability. Privacy is exactly the same. It's applying that robust risk mitigation framework at the front end and really assessing what you're using the technology for, how you're storing it, and giving the public an option to opt out with regard to not supplying it or removing it at any point in time. And that's critical for local government. We really need to gain the trust of the community, which at the end of the day are ratepayers. They're our shareholders basically, and they get to tell us what we need to spend money on, which will then influence what we then invest in moving forward. So critical your front end, any smart city technology deployment with privacy, and also looking at the ethics associated with that. And we had great discussions with the Information Media Development Authority in Singapore, where again, we adopted a self-assessment checklist, which we've now made available for all local governments within Australia to use to assess the implementation of artificial intelligence. And the Singaporean government stood us up in between Microsoft and Google and said, Darwin, best practice of CCTV analytics and the use of artificial intelligence. So we're pretty proud of it. Again, it goes into the T-shirt locker, but we're doing great things through our community, making it easy for local government not to start square one, but start somewhere along the train where we can help them with. And I think that's been critical for us as a legacy moving forward, our smart city journey. And at the end of the day, all smart cities is giving your city an opportunity to talk to you in a language which you understand. At the moment, they're deaf, dumb and blind. Cities don't speak without technology. So it's important that all local governments invest in smart city technologies to basically make our job easier, more accelerated outcomes for the community, increase our ratepayer base, flourishing livability. It's a simple equation.
Beautiful. All right, we'll probably build that
can
a
I
little
jump,
bit further.
Brad, may I jump in there and add to this? Because I think Joshua highlighted that privacy is always probably the first thing you need to worry about when you're putting in CCTV cameras. Whenever you have CCTV cameras, you have privacy issues. It's not an issue of whether you're doing face recognition or not. If humans are watching the video, they can see things and therefore they can infringe privacy. So what we normally do is put in a system where we can, where we have total privacy protection. On all cameras, all faces, all number plates and so on are blurred or redacted, but it's a reversible redaction so that when, let's say there's a murder on your main street, an authorized person can reverse the redaction with a special key. And this sort of reversible redaction meets the most stringent privacy regulations which exist today in places like Europe, where they have what is known as GDPR requirements. And in fact, it's the only system that provides full GDPR compliance while still providing all the intelligence that you require in the system.
Got it. So, Sean, I might come back to you for a moment. We've talked a little bit about privacy here, but on the other hand, there's also a push around the world towards open data and making data accessible. Now, you've gone about implementing an open data policy for the city of Mississauga. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and particularly about the benefits that you've got from the policy that you've implemented?
So the concept of open data is not new for sure. And we just revised our open data policy. We've had one in place since probably 2010 or 2011. And really it's to, to make sure that there's transparency in how we provide data to the public. It's there as a learning resource. It's there for innovation. But we just renewed our open data policy and shifted now to open by default, which means that we're really trying to make our as much of our data as possible available and open in formats which are beneficial, such as APIs. And so we've been using that with open challenges, so challenges on the private sector with student population, innovation challenges. And the last one we did was actually around trying to solve some of the challenges with the shift with COVID. So, learn, how people are learning differently, working differently, some of the challenges just around access to food, and some of the challenges that small business has been having. And we used that and included that in our Digital Main Street initiative, which was really to help a local business adopt digital so that they could compete with the online and the commerce. And so a lot of the open data really is creating opportunities for post-secondary and for startups to innovate and use that data in creative ways.
Got it. And I think, Joshua, you've probably got something to say on that as well, given the way you've been using data to boost the economy in Darwin.
Yeah, we deployed a data exchange in the early days, but what we found that pollination wasn't quite working because people didn't have those crazy questions yet. They weren't understanding the data sets we were making available. So again, we started the innovation pipeline and program with our community and drew out some of the questions they were asking and sort of led them along that process to start asking the questions so that we could provide the data. And I think that's a critical one for us. And all the way through that, try and be explainable. So it's not just we're collecting all this information just because we can. We're doing it for what reasons, and we're providing that back to the community and answering their questions. And that influences our elected members as well to make those data-driven decisions. And it's been an exciting journey here in Darwin from where it was 3 years ago to where it is now, and the way we make decisions as a collective, a local government is light years apart from where it was 3 years ago. It was from the use and adoption of technology. Simple as that.
All right. So I might stay with you for a moment, Joshua. Oh, sorry, Aisling, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I guess just to add from like a purely technology perspective, that's where we see, edge compute making sense. So really bringing that compute power closer to the edge, not only give you that real-time capability to get, insight on the data you're collecting, instantaneously, so you can actually see what's going on the road, for instance. But it also allows to comply with, the compliance of the data, where it's being hosted and who can access it.
Right. Now, Joshua mentioned the concept of asking crazy questions a moment ago. So once again, I'll just put the the call out to the audience that if you have any crazy questions or even any sane ones that you'd like to put to our panelists, then please, by all means, feel free to start typing those in. And we'll make sure that we address those, given that we're now into the second half of today, and we will run out of time faster than you can possibly imagine. Now, I'm going to stay with you for a second, Josh. What you described before, I guess, really did talk about IT being front and center and playing a much more prominent role as an interface between the city and its people. Can you understand that, how you go about ensuring that smart cities programs can actually effectively transform their IT functions and make them into enablers here rather than just back-end services as they might have once been?
Yeah, and look, I'll speak purely from a local government perspective. There's local government people out there listening, obviously. Your IT department's usually an area, it's under the building, it's kept away, it's got mold growing on walls, there's got server rooms, there's air conditioning. It's not a happy place. There's usually no windows. But these are the people that really drive innovation, and they're really solution focused. So what we did here in Darwin a few years ago, we took them out of a traditional corporate services directorate and pulled them into the innovation team and enabled them and flourished them and watered them to start thinking solutions based. And really, innovation, that's what it is. It's solutions based thinking. And so all of a sudden you have system administrators, you have people that deploy Wi-Fi, you have people that are working across different directors within the organisation providing service. But then they've also got to have a look at an outward lens. Okay, so from a community perspective, what else should we be doing, and what sort of technology should we be applying? And they're the right people to ask those sort of questions to. You know, as GM Innovation, Growth and Development, my portfolio is very broad, from property, parking, economic development, tourism, innovation, etc. At the end of the day, I'm not the content expert, but I have those bodies, those warm heads in my team to ask those questions to and enable those. So it's a directorate reapplication within local government. But what we've seen, the fruits of that bearing, is some great advancements, not only internally, but plugging in those external ones, building Power BI dashboards for simple corporate services reports to council so they understand pictures rather than reading layers and layers of information and paragraphs. So I think that's a critical one we can do in local government. We can all adopt that across a national stance as well.
Sean, I'm curious to know, if you had to go through something similar for the city of Mississauga in order to build out the capabilities that you've been deploying?
Yeah, I would say it's very similar, Joshua. There is the strategic partnership with our economic development, with tourism, with the local business improvement areas has actually been the interesting transformation, but also but with the city building community. So with planning, looking at the policy framework for building the city. And it's interesting. So I have architects now, traditional IT architects working on subdivision design. So working directly with them on, how will 5G be deployed in this subdivision? And we're looking at the infrastructure below and above ground, and then all the amenities that will really, be required in the future. And so the transformation has been interesting because it really has taken IT out of the back office into city building. And from my perspective, that's what smart city is. It's acknowledging digital in the public realm. And in cities, we have to do it responsibly. It's not an IT project. It is a collaboration. And it's interesting because there's a lot of new partnerships being formed that are challenging how cities run internally. So the way we used to do business just won't work in the future. So we have to rethink how we plan and deliver our own services. So there's a transformation at the city level, but also a transformation in our processes and how we think about our, how we're going to deliver services in the future.
Got it. So I guess one of the other things that we're always looking for, though, is the return. So I want to get a little bit deeper into some of the examples and benefits that you've all been experiencing through the work you've done. But Dr. Rustam, I'll start with you. Can you tell me a little bit about the tangible returns on investments that you're seeing from examples of cities that are implementing the kind of solutions that you can provide?
Sure. When you look at return on investment, you look at the return, the benefits. You also have to look at the costs. And people often think that making a city smart is actually a very expensive exercise. In fact, the value proposition we give to our customers is that we can make a city smart, we can put in a smart system at a lower cost than a dumb one. And we do this because we can use existing low resolution cameras. We don't require GPUs for our AI systems. We need less computing power. we can, by design, save on about 90% of storage, network bandwidth, and so on. Let me give you an example. In Bahrain, we did a project and the customer was going to spend something like $2 million on their project. And our software was going to be an extra $600,000 on top of that. And so the customer said, we love your technology, it's fantastic, but we have no money. So we said, but you have $2 million. And they said, no, but we are committed. We have to spend on the cameras, the computers, the storage, the network, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And after a lot of discussion, we convinced them to put in our system, put in the software with the total system. And the total project came in at $1.8 million. Why? Because we saved them something like $800,000 just on the storage by a true effective design. And you might say, well, what about our partners, Intel? Aren't they worried about selling computers and storage and so on? And the answer is no. I think all of us on the industry side are keen to make sure that the customer has the most cost-effective system, because then that ensures a long-term benefit to the customer. And of course, that results in long-term partnerships. So that's on the cost side. On the benefit side, every application you put in has to generate a benefit, a tangible or an intangible benefit. And we work with our customers to determine what that should be and what that can be based on past experience. For example, if you have a graffiti detection system, what was it costing the council to clean up graffiti over the past 2 or 3 years? And after putting in a system, how would you plan to reduce the cost of cleaning up that graffiti? And usually you find that these systems will pay for themselves within a few months.
Got it. So we're getting down towards the last 15 minutes. So I want to get into some examples of the work that our two Smart City representatives here have been doing within their hometown. So Sean, I'll come back to you. We've talked a little bit about examples, and I love the one you gave us before about moving cars away from the train station faster, because that's something I've experienced a lot in my own life. Looking forward to that here. But you've also been doing a lot of work in the city of Mississauga using smart city concepts to transform the city itself into a technology business hub. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been working on there?
I'll give you 2 specific examples. And the first one I'll give is more on the post-secondary side, because it does tie into our business partner side. So in post-secondary, we partnered with a campus and actually had helped them build a campus in downtown, because we wanted to revitalize our downtown by putting the campus there. That met a very strategic objective. But when we did that, we agreed that we would manage their infrastructure, the network infrastructure. And as part of that, we advertised their secure wireless network across all of the city facilities, so all the libraries, community centers. So in a way, we created a campus for them, which was across the entire city, including our transit terminals. And so we were monitoring that and found it to be very successful. And actually, the use case that I found the most interesting was students would leave the campus, walk across the road, go to the major transit terminal, and that's where we had the most logins, because they would leave school and it's like forgetting your books. They forgot some resources, and while in the transit terminal, they're logging in and getting their school resources. So that was a huge success. And we challenged the local university to do something similar. And they said something that was quite interesting, and you might know what this is. So we were going to do the same thing, advertise their network. And they said, well, do you know what Eduroam is? And I said, I haven't got a clue. Well, Eduroam is a gateway to all post-secondary schools in the world. And so we looked into it, and we became the first city in Canada to be an Eduroam service provider. So we started to advertise Eduroam all over the city, in over 500 locations. And within the first 6 months, we had 1 million students log into Eduroam through our infrastructure. Over half of them were from the UK. And so what we learned was the importance of providing access to exchange students, because at least 10% of all students are in an exchange program from other countries. So 50% utilization in Mississauga was from the UK. So that was interesting. On the business side, the Digital Main Street program for COVID was really important because we had boots on the ground showing small business how to implement commerce, how to be competitive, how to run some basic digital tools. But then we also built a collaboration platform using Microsoft Teams, actually, because the economic development couldn't go door to door or work with the businesses because of COVID. So we created this collaboration platform, starting with life sciences and aerospace, to really allow economic development to understand, what business needed during, certainly during COVID, but also to create those business-to-business opportunities. So now you've got businesses within Mississauga who have never worked together before, collaborating together, and our objective was to make that happen so they could create opportunity for each other, and that's exactly what's happening. So I mean, that was a digital transformation, which really, when you think about a local hub, so a community hub where you can bring business together, this really became our digital hub, and it's grown way beyond our expectations as far as the utilization and the opportunity it's created.
Right. So we've had a question come in for Ocean, so I'll pop that through now. Ocean, what other smarts are there to capture data in precincts other than just CCTV? So I guess what are the other mechanisms for data capture that you're seeing proving popular?
Yeah, it's an interesting question and really taps into, the future. So I guess that there are a couple of points here that coming through. So essentially new cameras. So we're talking about LiDAR technology, for instance. So that's becoming more and more popular in a way. But what it can do as well, and it's kind of relating to why we engage with partners such as iOmniscient locally, and also why they won the Intel Innovation Partner Award, is leveraging what you currently have. We don't really talk about rip and replace, right? But we really brief the word optimization. So how do we optimize what you currently have within your cities, your district, and so on? And so you can add wireless technologies, for instance, that could replace CCTV to make actionable insights on data being captured. But you know what? I'd love to have a deeper conversation. We've got a full team behind myself that we can have such conversation with yourself.
Brilliant. So definitely an open opportunity there to connect after today is wrapped up. Now, Joshua, we've got Sean to rattle off some examples of the work that he's been doing. You've got a few up your sleeve as well. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the key initiatives that you've been rolling out in Darwin that have been leveraging off all the hard work you've done?
No worries at all, but I won't hoover all the oxygen out of this conversation. But I guess when we look at cities, they're a beautiful mix of people and place, and I think what technology does is enable the empowerment of those spaces, transforming them into places. So for us, it was the use of CCTV analytics and the use of lights on our beautiful esplanade. If you haven't been to Darwin before, jump on. There's virtual reality Darwin. You can jump on, have a look at. You can immerse yourself. But we're 270 degrees surrounded by water here in the harbour in Darwin. Beautiful esplanade that runs nearly 1 kilometre up the foreshore, and just the activity of providing new lights and CCTV through that esplanade with Wi-Fi enablement. We saw an increase of 50% use of that area and a decrease of 50% of any issues with regarding to safety. So the activation of that space with technology proved fantastic for us. And also working with partners like a mobility provider here from Singapore, Neuron. We recently deployed e-scooters and e-bikes across our city, and sharing that information with our businesses there to actually support them to say, during these times, this is how many scooters are going past, this is how many people have gone through, these are the times of the day, etc. Sharing those insights, those third-party insights which are made available through our providers, is critical for our business owners. And from what we've seen moving forward, we didn't think we had a micro-mobility issue here in Darwin. We didn't think we had a last or a first mile transport issue, but we obviously did, because within 12 months we had 1 million users. And for a city like Darwin, 150,000 people, that's not bad going. And moving forward, we're increasing that exponentially. So these are really, really good insights which have been enabled by technology and the adaptation and ingestion of those insights from either third party or what we've got across our city network. And just to reiterate on the question to Ocean, I think Wi-Fi presence reporting is a really simple one, which most cities have deployed Wi-Fi. Some presence reporting back for you as a local government is critical as well. And even simple demographic breakdowns are great pieces of information.
Got it. So I've got another audience question here, but before I pose that, I'm just going to come back to Dr. Rustam. We're running through examples at the moment. I'm just wondering if you have any other standout use cases of where you see your technology bringing smart cities to life.
I suppose there are many. This year we are 20 years old, so we are considered the world's oldest video analysis company. And we've been doing this long before people like Google made the term AI fashionable. So if I think about some of the cities we've done across 70 odd countries, Dubai, Hong Kong, several in China, India, and the US, and so on. I suppose the example of a capability which has given most value is the concept of a video utility. In the past, if you had 5 different stakeholders within a local government and outside, because there are stakeholders outside like the police or the railways and the bus companies and so on, each of them would put in their own network and their own systems and their own cameras and so on. In one country, in Dubai, there were 7 different agencies involved, and they all had their own networks, sometimes multiple cameras on the same pole and so on. With the concept of a video utility, you have one network and you provide the right information to each of the stakeholders, the information that they are authorized to get. So the traffic department can see how many cyclists went past. The police can get information on whether hooligans were around. You know, the shops along the street can get information on how many people walk by, and the council can actually sell this information back to the shops and help to monetize the system. You can manage your parking and do all the different things using the same single unified network of cameras. And I think that's a concept that has become very popular amongst some of our customers. I suppose one of the big challenges for our customers is how do you figure out how to do all this? And we found that there are very few people around who actually have that expertise. So we've recently put in a whole team of experts who will advise, who provide the design service to the local councils on how to do this and how to make it happen.
Got it. Thank you. We're getting down to the last 10 minutes. I've got a few more questions that I need to put through from the audience. So Sean, I'll get you to come back up. Have you seen any challenges with equality and engagement from the businesses using the Digital Hub? Have you been able to measure participation from home-based businesses?
Yeah, for sure. The participation has been really, it's been monitored throughout the entire process. So we report back through our council. So economic development actually has a COVID response plan. So they actually report their metrics back out through council on their outreach programs, what the uptake is. And they actually go to the detail of pre-COVID-19 revenues for small business and what they're running at now. And so the bottom line is a takeout restaurant is running at 92% of pre-COVID revenue. Because they actually can manage and operate pretty much like they did before, whereas a restaurant with seating is running at 12%. And so they're using that information because they just don't have the facilities or the digital presence actually is one of the bigger challenges. And so they're focusing their efforts on the businesses that are at the 12%, because the ones that are running at 92%, are getting by. They're not doing great, but they don't need the same level of assistance. So the information, the data is there to help us make good decisions on how to best help those who are in the greatest need. And some of that can be access to some of the grants, either federal, provincial grants as well for those companies, for small businesses.
Got it. So I've got a question here that I'm going to direct to Joshua in the first instance, and then I'd invite anyone else who wants to jump in to do so. Questions in relation to the deployment of sensors and smart infrastructure. What work have you done to ensure the community has awareness of your smart tech and access to the benefits of the data, setting aside those who've been motivated to visit the Open Data portal?
Look, from the different types of information we share with our community, so we have a smart city intelligence platform, so all the IoT information comes through there. Our CCTV analytics sits somewhat separate, and we only ever see, as a council, we only see the analytic dashboards associated with the cameras. We don't collect any of the images that's stored in a separate area, and police actually have access to that. So we have agreements in place to make sure we're legislative compliant in that perspective. But all our IoT, all the other information we put forward as a council, including budgets, municipal plans, etc., are all available through the intelligence platform. So we make that open and shared. If they want more information, they can request the relevant piece of information and we send that through. But it is one of those platforms which is highly utilised, and a lot of the community members have access to it. And it's across everything we do. We always consult with the community at the front end before deploying any technology in different areas.
Good. Sean, I'll put that same question to you then. How do you go about ensuring that people understand what's out there and what's available to them?
So I'll just build on what Joshua said, because his points are really good and very similar to how what our approach is. But as part of the Smart City Master Plan, we created what was called the Center for Civic Curiosity, which is not a bricks and mortar building, but is our engagement platform to really help the public, to engage with the public, but help them understand the types of digital that already exist, whether it's open data. We've actually used the Center for Civic Curiosity in our first phase of our smart city policy. So we took out principles for data and privacy out for public consultation. That was part of our Center for Civic Curiosity. And now we're actually taking a draft policy, smart city policy, out for public consultation. And again, that's how we engage with the public around whether it's new digital, whether it's around the open data portal, or how we use data is through that engagement process. So we saw that as an integral part of the overall Smart City Master Plan.
Right. So we're going to need to wrap up in a minute, but Dr. Rustam, I'll just put this same question to you. Based on the clients you're working with, do you have any advice on how they best let people know about what they're doing and how it can be accessed?
Well, you already got inputs from Sean and Joshua. I think those are sort of best-in-class ideas. I wouldn't want to add to that.
All right, I'll let you off the hook on that one then,
Yes.
but it sounds like you've certainly got plenty of examples up your sleeve of where companies have done it well. So we are down to the last few minutes, so I think it might be a good opportunity for us to perhaps collect up some thoughts that our participants might have. Oshan, you've been in the background there a little bit, so I'm going to bring you back into the conversation once more. Any thoughts you'd like to add here, and particularly any advice that you might have then for our participants in terms of, for our guests today that are tuning in from the outside as to examples they might want to look at or next steps you recommend they might want to take?
Yeah, of course. Just one thing on the last question that has been emitted here. What we tend to see is the earlier you engage the community and you gather their thoughts, the more take you're going to have into, participation and them looking into what's available for them. It usually takes a bit more work because you've got more feedback to go through early on, but then the uptake is greater later on. So yeah, just on that question, I guess in regards to your question, Brad, we'll be delighted to, hear more from everyone that joined today. I'll be reaching out to you. So please don't be a stranger. We'd love to have a conversation and talk about some of your initiatives and projects that you are looking at within your own cities. And yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. All right, Sean, joining us from all the way from Canada. I'll come to you now. Any final advice then, anything you'd recommend for anyone out there that's wanting to follow in the footsteps of what you've achieved at the City of Mississauga?
Yeah, I was asked a question once by the media, and it was, what is a dumb city? And I thought long and hard because, that's one of those defining moments. And I just said, you know what? A dumb city is one that tries to do it alone. And I think partnerships and the community, and the private sector, that's what a smart city does is they don't try to do it alone. Seek help, get the experts, get community input.
Joshua, I think that very ably echoes what you said earlier, that cities shouldn't be starting from a blank page. But any other advice you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers before we wrap up today?
Oh, look, I just think, just to reiterate Sean's comments, it's a lonely place when you start at square one, and you don't need to, and especially in the local government lands. Like, we're all here to support each other. If we've got a smart city, let's work together to have a smart region and a smart nation. And that's critical for us. And local government often leads the way to influence what state or territory government do next, and then what the federal government does. So it's a really push up. So we've got that direct line with our community. We know what they want, and we try and enable and deliver that. So don't think you're alone. Please reach out. We're always here. We're happy to share. There's great associations and networks within Australia, Smart Cities Australia and New Zealand, run by Adam Beck, and also platforms like this. Please reach out and use the connections you've got.
Great. And Dr. Rustam, I'll give you the last word, seeing you've been doing this for 20 years. Any final advice you'd recommend for our listeners and viewers today?
Well, it's interesting. When we did the Singapore Smart City, we asked them, what do you want? And they didn't know what they wanted, but they wanted to be first. So what we did for them was we actually wrote them a book on smart cities. And we said, this is what a smart city of the future should look like. And in fact, that is what they implemented. What I'll ask Ocean to do, because she has all your contacts, is to send all the participants a copy of that Smart City book, a soft copy, so that they can at least get a feel for the types of things that can be done for smart cities. Thank you.
Brilliant. All right, on that note, that does take us to time, so we'll need to wrap up now. So firstly, on behalf of Intel and 6 Degrees Media, I'd like to thank everyone who's tuned in today. We hope you've taken away some useful insights, and we look forward to following up with you. Once again, to our guests today, to the four of you, thank you all for joining us from various parts of the country and from around the world and sharing your insights. It's always a pleasure to hear what different people out there who are practicing these technologies are actually delivering, and particularly the benefits that they're delivering for the citizens and businesses they serve. So thank you so much for sharing what you've shared today. Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up now. Thank you all once more for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you at future